The American Civil War from 1861 until 1865. Long back in history, many countries were using black slaves. Since the 1600s, there has been slavery in America. The slaves came from the African continent and ended in America, where the British colonies were dominating in that century, as you can see as the map. Slavery was legal in every state until the 1800s. But during the 1800s, most of the northern states abolished slavery, which is the orange states at the map. And this was the grounding of the Union, all states which abolished slavery. Opposite the northern states, the southern states wouldn't abolish slavery and went out of the Union, and instead they established the Confederate States of America, which included South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, and Louisiana, and later on some more states, which is marked with green at the map. Now there were two national governments. The Union got Abraham Lincoln and the Confederate States of America got Jefferson Davis. These two governments couldn't agree, and because of their uncompromising difference, free or slave states, it ended up in the American Civil War. The cause of why the southern states wouldn't abolish slaves was because of the using. The southern state used slave as working capacity. For example, it could be at the plantations where the slaves were growing rice, cotton, tobacco, or sugar. Therefore, the southern states were highly addicted of slaves, opposite the northern states, where slaves primarily were used as housewives. These uncompromising differences against the northern and southern states ended up, as we said before, in the American Civil War, a war which started on April 12, 1861, where the Confederate States of America made the first attack against the Union Army. An attack which found place in South Carolina. Lincoln answered that attack with a counterattack, where he requested the northern people to go into an army. The war went on until the final battle, which found place in Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865, where the northern states won and got slavery abolished in every state in America. In the 5 years where the war went on, many soldiers and private people got injured. 620,000 people got killed. And therefore it is the bloodiest war which has found place in America, and the war is a big historical event. The causes which led the Civil War has a long list, but the most central cause is that the northern states were becoming a lot more industrialist, while the southern states weren't that industrialized. Also, some other facts were a cause of the war, for example, the states' rights.
Abraham Lincoln, February the 12th, 1809 to April 15, 1865, was an American politician and lawyer who served as the 16th President of the United States from March 1861 until his assassination in April 1865. Lincoln led the United States through its Civil War, its bloodiest war, and its greatest moral, constitutional, and political crisis. In doing so, he preserved the Union, abolished slavery, strengthened the federal government, and modernized the economy. The Emancipation Proclamation was a presidential proclamation and executive order issued by President Abraham Lincoln. On January the 1st, 1863, in a single stroke, it changed the federal legal status of more than 3 million enslaved people in the designated areas of the South from slave to free. It had the practical effect that as soon as a slave escaped the control of the Confederate government by running away or through advances of federal troops, the slave became legally free. Eventually, it reached and liberated all of the designated slaves. It was issued as a war measure during the American Civil War, directed to all of the areas in rebellion and all segments of the executive branch, including the Army and Navy of the United States. It proclaimed that the freedom of slaves in 10 states, because it was issued under the president's war powers, it necessarily excluded areas not in rebellion. It applied to more than 3 million of the 4 million slaves at the time.
The Battle of Gettysburg was fought from July 1st to July 3rd in 1863. The battle is considered the most important event of the American Civil War. July 1st. Open learning that the Army of the Potomac was on its way, General Robert E. Lee planned to assemble his army in the prosperous crossroads town of Gettysburg, 35 miles southwest from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. One of the Confederate divisions in A.P. Hill's command approached the town in search of supplies early on July 1st, only to find that two Union cavalry brigades had arrived the previous day. As the bulk of both armies headed towards Gettysburg, Confederate forces were able to drive the outnumbered Federal defenders back through town to Cemetery Hill, located a half-mile to the south. Seeking to press his advantage before more Union troops could arrive, Lee gave discretionary orders to attack Cemetery Hill to Ewell, who had taken command of the Army of Northern Virginia's 2nd Corps after Lee's most trusted general, Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson, was mortally wounded at Chancellorsville. Ewell, destined to order the attack, considered the Federal position too strong. His reticence would earn him many unfavorable comparisons to the Great Stonewall. By dusk, a Union corps under Winfield Scott Hancock had arrived and extended the defensive line along Cemetery Ridge to the hill known as Little Round Top. 3 more Union corps arrived overnight to strengthen its defenses. July 2nd. As the next day dawned, the Union Army has established strong positions from Culp's Hill to Cemetery Ridge. Lee assists his enemy's positions and determined against the advice of his defensively minded second-in-command, James Longstreet, to attack the Federals where they stood. He ordered Longstreet to lead an attack on the Union left, while Ewell's corps would strike the right near Culp's Hill. Through his orders were to attack as early in the day as possible. Longstreet didn't get his men into position until 4 p.m., when they opened fire on the Union's corps commanded by Daniel Sickles. Over the next several hours, bloody fighting raged along Sickles' line, which stretched from the nest of boulders known as Devil's Den into a peach orchard, as well as in a nearby wheat field and on the slopes of Little Round Top. Thanks to fierce fighting by the 1 Minnesota regiment, the Federals were able to hold Little Round Top, but lost the orchard field and Devil's Den. Sickles himself was seriously wounded. Ewell's men had advanced on the Union forces at Culp's Hill and East Cemetery Hill in the coordination with Longstreet's 4 p.m. attack. But Union forces had stalled their attack by dusk. Both armies suffered extremely heavy losses on July 2nd, with 9,000 or more casualties on each side. The combined casualty total from 2 days of fighting came to nearly 35,000, the largest 2-day toll of the war. July 3rd. Early in the morning of July 3rd, Union forces at the 20th Army Corps pushed back a Confederate threat against Culp's Hill after a 7-hour firefight and regained their strong position. Believing his men had been on the brink of victory the day before, Lee decided to send 3 divisions against the Union center of Cemetery Ridge. Fewer than 15,000 troops led by a division under George Pickett would be tasked the marching some 3/4 of a mile across open fields to attack Dog and Union infantry positions. Despite Longstreet's protests, Lee was determined, and the attack later known as Picket Charge went forward around 3 p.m. after an artillery bombardment by some 150 Confederate guns. Union infantry opened fire on the advancing rebels from behind stone walls, while regiments from Vermont, New York, and Ohio hit both of the enemy's flanks. Caught from all sides, barely half of the Confederates survived, and Pickett's division lost 2/3 of its men. As the survivors stumbled back to their open positions, Lee and Longstreet scrambled to shore up their defensive lines after the failed assault. Aftermath. His hopes of a victorious invasion of the North dashed. Lee waited for a Union counterattack on July 4th, but it never came. That night, in heavy rain, the Confederate general withdrew his declimated army towards Virginia. Through the cautious Meade would be criticized for not pursuing the enemy after Gettysburg. The battle was a crushing defeat for the Confederacy. Union casualties in the battle numbered 23,000, while the Confederates had lost some 28,000 men, more than a third of Lee's army. The North rejoiced, while the South mourned its hopes for foreign recognition of the Confederacy erased. By the defeat of Gettysburg. See you. Demoralized by the defeat of Gettysburg, Lee offered his resignation to the President Jefferson.
Gettysburg Address is a famous speech by the U.S. President Abraham Lincoln, one of the best known in American history. It was delivered by Lincoln during the American Civil War on the afternoon of Thursday, November the 19th, 1863, at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, 4.5 months after the Union armies defeated those of the Confederacy at the Battle of the Gettysburg.
Abraham Lincoln's carefully crafted address, secondary to other presentations that day, was one of the greatest and most influential statements of national purpose. In just over 2 minutes, Lincoln reiterated the principle of human equality, espoused by the Declaration of Independence, and proclaimed the Civil War as a struggle for the preservation of the Union, surrounded by the census crisis. With a new birth of freedom that would bring true equality to all of its citizens, Lincoln also redefined the Civil War as a struggle not just for the Union, but also for the principle of human equality. Beginning with the now iconic phrase 407 years ago, referring to the United States Declaration of Independence in 1776. Lincoln examined the founding principles of the United States as started in the Declaration of Independence in the context of Civil War. Lincoln also memorized the sacrifices of those who gave their lives at Gettysburg, and extolled virtues of the listeners to ensure the survival of Americans' repressive democracy. That government of people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth.